given more of my attention to women of the wall than I've given any cause since 1988. It's been a central part of my life. Tonight, I'm going to try to do my very best to speak sort of as an activist, but sort of as an historian as well, to give you a picture of what is happening. This moment right now, this moment in the life of Women of the Wall is hugely important, hugely contentious. I just had dinner with my cousins for the last 2 hours, and I've not checked my email. And I'm concerned that I'm not giving you the most up-to-date of what's going on. So this is not the most up-to-date. It's 2 hours off. But that's the extent to which things are happening very, very quickly now, and in important ways. And I might at one point probably reveal, I will probably do it the whole time, I'll probably be revealing to you why I think this cause is particularly important and what I think some of the better moves to make at this moment are. 1988, there was a conference in Jerusalem, one of the first international conferences of Jewish women. And one of the women there was Rivka Haut. Rivka Haut, of blessed memory, the founder of Women of the Wall, who died a week ago yesterday. If I may, I would like to dedicate this talk, this conversation, to the memory of Rivka Haut. Rivka Haut was known to me because she was the founder of two very significant movements within Orthodox Judaism. She was, along with Susan Aronoff, was the founder of a group of advocates for agunot, that is, women whose husbands refuse to give them the official writ of divorce called a get. And without that document, while their husbands could go off and marry and have children, the women themselves could not go off and marry and have children without their relationships by the Orthodox world being called adulterous, and without their children being called illegitimate. And so Rivka advocated for changes within the marriage ceremony and the ketubah, the wedding contract, to make the lives of these women better. If you read the New York Times, you will see that there are still, it is still very difficult for certain women to get a get from recalcitrant husbands who are using this in order to, it's really loud now, who are using this for the sake of extortion. The other issue that Rivka was very engaged in is she had this crazy idea of women's tefillah groups, Orthodox women getting together and doing the Sabbath or the new moon prayers. This just seems to you, to me, to anyone right now, just seems to be the tamest of ideas. Like how dangerous could it be that a group of Orthodox women would get together, that those who knew how to read from the Torah scroll would read from the scroll, that they would chant the service together. At the time, in the late 1980s, within the Orthodox world, this was seen as highly problematic, that it would lead to the breakdown of Jewish families, and I heard one rabbi say, would lead to the impotence of its men. How that was going to happen, I wasn't quite so sure at that time. I'm still not so sure. Many rabbis refused to countenance the women in their community praying together, and the majority would not allow the women to have these prayer services, which usually took place just once a month, would refuse to allow them to happen in the synagogue property. And so they would take place often in people's homes. But this was growing. These groups were growing and growing and gaining strength. And in particular, now that at that time, more women were gaining, because of the influence of Jewish feminism, more women were gaining education in Jewish texts. They were gaining competency as leaders of Jewish prayer, and being able to, they were gaining the synagogue skills to read from Torah. So it was a moment of growth and change and possibility. So Rivka Haut was one of the women who was invited to go to this conference, and it was in Jerusalem, and her topic was women's prayer groups. And the night before she was supposed to give her session, she said to her friend Norma Baumel-Rosen, she said, what if, instead of talking about this, what if we went to the Kotel? What if we went to the Western Wall and prayed there as a group of women, and we brought the Torah, we found a Torah, and we brought it there. And it just so happened that Rabbi Helene Ferris, one of the first Reform women rabbis, and a very important member, who would be a very important member of our group, she was able to secure the Torah, and a Torah scroll was brought to the Kotel. The women came together in the area called the Ezrat Nashim, the women's area. Now, if we are facing, I'm going to be, I'll be with you right now, okay? If you go to the Western Wall, say that's the wall.
It is the wall.
From here to here is the men's section. This is not exact. Say from here to here is the women's section. It's not exact, but I'm close. And there is a partition between the men's section and the women's section. And if there's a family bar mitzvah, and the men are in different little groups where the bar mitzvah services are being, the morning services are being said, and if you're a woman and it's your menfolk who are on the other side, you're pretty much teetering on little benches that are near the wall, and you might be throwing over some candy, and you can't really see very well, but you're very joyous. Two things. Before our women went to the wall, these women went to the wall, they acknowledged that they were not just Orthodox women who were going to be praying by the protocol of the women's tefillah group. They were Reform, conservative, Orthodox, and Reconstructionist women, and they figured out amongst themselves how to pray together as a group, respecting each other's differences, all of them making compromises. I don't know how many of you have been part of prayer groups of all women or of all men across different denominations who have figured out how to all pray together. It was, at that time, it was incredibly rare, an incredibly rare occurrence, and it was all the more important because this was a time, those of you who go back to 1988, it was a time of the Who is a Jew debates, where there was a great deal of hearing that who counted as a Jew and who didn't, delegitimating other people's Jewish identities. So the women were doing something truly important. Now, I want to clarify something as well about the Kotel itself. And I presume many of you know this, and so this is a repetition. The Western Wall is important to Judaism because it is one of the retaining walls, so a far distant wall, of the ancient temple, where sacrifice was offered in the years when the temple existed before the temple was destroyed. For thousands of years, when Jews had access to this place, it was a place for prayer and petition and tears. It was a place where Jews mourned the destruction of the temple. It was a place where Jews prayed to God for a return to wholeness once again. The Western Wall was never, before 1967, was never an Orthodox synagogue. When Jews came to pray there before 1948, as a rule, there was not a women's section or a men's section. Generally, individuals went there to pray on their own, and we have pictures from the 1800s, from the 1900s, we have drawings, we have photographs of men and women praying near each other, praying individually near each other. Between 1948 and 1967, no Jew could pray at the Western Wall. The area was under Jordanian control, and no Jew had access to this area. In 1967, with the Six-Day War, and many folks will know these jubilant photographs of the state of Israel, of its soldiers overtaking this area, liberating the wall, and it became a place, a Jewish place once again. Nearly immediately, a mechitza went up. A mechitza being a separation between men and women. And while the area was also used for all kinds of national events, such as marking young people going in their initiation into the military, it was also used as a place to mark Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day, memorial. It was growing and growing into an Orthodox prayer space. That is, and keep this in mind, only since 1967. So this is not an ancient tradition. This is not the least bit an ancient tradition. So what happened when when this group of women went there in 1988? They prayed, and of course it didn't necessarily have to happen this way, but they were their prayer books were taken from them, chairs were hurled at them, they were mocked, they were ridiculed. They came back again each month on Rosh Chodesh. The Rosh Chodesh is the new moon for many generations. It has been for many centuries. It has been a holiday particularly important to Jewish women, and of late, since the 1970s or so, it has become a holiday observed by Jewish feminists, a time to come together, to observe, to express sisterhood, to learn together. So our women, these women would come together, women of diaspora and Israeli women as well, would come together and pray. Each time they would be met with more and more violence. The rabbi who was designated to be chief over the wall at that time, his name was Rabbi Getz, he said that when women come to the kotel, it's like bringing a pig to the kotel, and women of the wall are pigs themselves. They were not greeted with hospitality. Violence grew. On one occasion, the police needed to use tear gas. Our women, the women of the wall, petitioned the government, they petitioned the Ministry of Religion, they petitioned the police that they should have protection when they went to the wall to pray. That seems logical. The reaction was, and just make sure that I get this correctly, the reaction was that the Ministry of Religious Affairs declared there will be no religious ceremonies not in accordance with the traditions of the place, which hurt the feelings of the praying public. I'm actually going to repeat that again. There will be no religious ceremony not in accordance with the traditions of the place, which hurt the feelings of the praying public. And the transgression of women of the wall who would be hurting the feelings of the praying public would be 5 to 12 months of imprisonment and a fine. This did not actually take place, the imprisonment or the fine. Now, if you're thinking about that, like something's a little fishy here, something's a little fishy, you can imagine that if you were walking through town with a mink stole and a Rolodex watch, and someone took it away from you, that the police would say that you were going to be fined and imprisoned because you made someone steal these things from you. It's not exactly a great example, but I think you get the idea that the women were being portrayed as the ones who were causing violence, the ones who were inciting the chaos that emerged. And this very notion that they were offending the praying public. Well, are not Jews who go to the kotel, are not Jewish women who go to the kotel to pray, are they not praying people? Are their prayers different than, are they not legitimate in the way that the prayers are legitimate at the kotel? Prayers that have begun there, a prayer practice that had begun there since ancient history, 1967. In 1989, Rivka Haut and the feminist psychologist Phyllis Chesler summoned me to New York. We actually went to a Chinese restaurant called Schmoke Bernstein, which I had heard about, but I just kept saying it again to everyone who would ask. I'd say, I'm going to Schmoke Bernstein. I just thought it was so wonderful. And I was truly intimidated by the idea of meeting with Phyllis Chesler, who had written a really important book, I believe it was called Women in Madness, really important, I won't say a seminal study, I'll say a trailblazing study. She's a feminist scholar, and Rivka Haut, whose work I knew, and they asked me, because I had written about, I was about to publish this book about the first generation of women in Israel who were learned in Talmud and Torah, they asked me if I would help. They asked me if I would be part of this, if I would speak on their behalf, if I would write on their behalf. And then at that moment, no one asked me to strategize on their behalf because I had no idea, that wasn't even a word in my vocabulary. And they certainly didn't ask me to fundraise on their behalf because I didn't know about how to do that either. I learned. I learned really fast. And the reason I said yes to them was not because I wanted to pray at the kotel with anybody. I didn't want to pray there by myself. I'll be perfectly honest here. I didn't want to pray at the kotel by myself. I didn't care to, as a liberal Jew, my style is not to pray with women only. I'm much happier praying in conservative, reform, or reconstructionist, or Havurah settings with men and women both. This was not a prayer practice that I wanted to do myself. The kotel for me it's not, for me, I went to Camp Ramah as a kid. I learned there that God was everywhere, and it seemed to stick. God didn't seem to be more present for me in this particular site. And frankly, and I'll be fully honest here, the connection to the ancient temple, with the weight of destruction and weeping, the connection to the ancient temple with its heritage of animal sacrifice, it didn't happen. You know, I could say if I was a good historian, it would have resonated more with me. It didn't. However, what resonated with me is that my Orthodox sister asked me to help. She asked me to help with this fight of creating a symbol. Not just the fact that they wanted to pray there, but she knew it was important for Jewish women around the world to have a symbol of what it meant for a Jewish woman to pray with integrity as a Jewish man does. That a Jewish woman should be able to wear a prayer shawl, that she should be able to hold a Torah, read from the Torah, chant from the Torah. These wishes of Rivka's seemed so powerful and so important. The symbol seemed so important that I said, sure, I'm in. And I became part of a powerful sisterhood. Rivka told me that the first time that she prayed at the kotel, it was the most powerful feeling of sisterhood she had ever experienced. She also said for the first time in her life, she experienced the Shekhinah, the divine presence. And Talmud teaches that no matter how much destruction Jerusalem has known, the presence of the Shekhinah, the divine presence, has never left the wall. And this is Rivka's teaching. Women of the Wall, as we constituted ourselves, and we constituted ourselves in Israel and in North and South and North America, as well as the International Committee for Women of the Wall, we sent another petition to the court, to the Israeli Supreme Court. This time, the justices instructed the government to set up conditions for women to pray. The court did not want to get involved in to say church and state is not quite work for Israel, but they did not want to get involved in this case involving the religious authorities and the Ministry of Religion. At this time going on in the Knesset, in Israel, everyone's doing something in a different place. And no one quite, it would not be incorrect for me to say that one hand does not know what the other hand is doing. At that time, the Knesset authorized a law that would bypass a court verdict, allowing women to pray at the kotel, again with more punishment, this time up to 7 years in prison. But the court prevailed, and the court established, and this, we knew we were in trouble then, the court established a commission, a committee to look into this, and this committee took about 7 years to emerge with a verdict. In 2003, and at this time we had been in and out of the Supreme Court quite a bit, and certainly it had been proven within the Supreme Court that what the women were doing at the kotel, and I think this is important, what the women were doing at the kotel was in full accordance with the strictest interpretation of halakha, of Jewish law. They were doing nothing that was not permitted. Their sole transgression was that the ultra-Orthodox Jews at the wall did not approve of their prayer practice. In 2003, the government rules that within a year, a new area is going to be established for the women to pray at a place called Robinson's Arch. If you've been to Israel recently, you know there's this area that feels like it's sort of around the corner from the kotel, which is attached to the archaeological gardens, a place where there's a great deal of digging, a place where an organization called Elad Ir David is quickly taking over and making this into attempting to make it into a national tourist site. The government said within a year they were going to create a place at Robinson's Arch for the women to pray. And if that place was not established within a year, then the women were free to keep on going to the kotel and praying as they were praying. A year passed. No place was ever established for women to pray at Robinson's Arch. My people, Women of the Wall, we said to the court, you know, you can establish this place, but we have no intention of going there. We wouldn't have petitioned the court all these years in order to pray and end up praying someplace else where we could have been praying from the very start. There was always just a small group of die-hard women going to the kotel each month to pray. Rosh Chodesh mornings in the spring are quite lovely. In the summer, they're painfully hot. In the winter, they're very cold and rainy. You've got to get there quite early. It's hard to find a place to park. It's a pain in the neck. Our people have gone there for 25 years. I think that's important to know about steadfastness of effort. They kept on going, and something unusual happened in 2009. One young woman named Nofrat Frankel was praying with the group. This woman, a young woman, an Israeli woman who was a med student. She had served in the Israeli army. She was arrested by the police for the crime of wearing a talit. So the police had decided, and they were advised by Rabbi Shmuel Rabinowitz, who is the presiding rabbi of a group called the Western Wall Foundation, which has, through the Israeli government, been given jurisdiction over the prayer site. She was arrested. This did not make conservative Jews happy to see one of their own arrested. And for the first time, Israelis began to pay, large groups of Israelis began to pay attention. For the most part, Israelis were not, and I think I need to tell you this, Israelis were not very galvanized by this issue. First of all, 50%, at least 50% of Israelis are secular. Few Israelis who do go to pray, go to the wall to pray. They have synagogues to pray to pray at. The wall is it's a curious place to pray. The people who probably want to go there most of all are primarily tourists or certain yeshivas that are based in the precinct of the kotel. With each month, each time our women went, there were more and more arrests going on. 4 women, 3 women, 2 women, famous women, the sister of Sarah Silverman and her niece Hallel were arrested. Anat Hoffman, who had become a woman who works for the Reform Movement as the head of Iraq, the Israel Reform Action Center, thank you. Anat Hoffman was arrested multiple times, and at one point, Anat was not only arrested, but she was taken to prison, strip searched, and kept there overnight for the crime of carrying a Torah. This should be devastating news for those of you who have parents who wish that you would read Torah, who wish that you would have a Jewish education, who wish that you would wear the talit that was given to you for a bat mitzvah or a bar mitzvah. The fact that a Jewish woman would be arrested for being a Jewish woman was frankly horrifying. And it made the images of Anat and the other women made it to the pages of the secular press, including the front page of the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and other secular journals. Suddenly, the Israeli government took notice. Women of the Wall was a situation that needed to be dealt with. Now, you may wonder, how did the government decide to deal with this? They assigned the task to Natan Sharansky, well beloved in Israel, the former refusnik, who now is the chair of the Jewish JNF, the Jewish National Fund, so a person of a highly respected person very important, who came up with this idea that there would be one entrance to the Kotel, one area for men, one way for men to go, one way place for women to go, and another place as Rat Yisrael, where everybody else would go together, all liberal Jews who wanted to pray together. And these three areas would have a single entrance, and they would all be raised up together in a similar, to similar height. The archaeologists did not like this. The Muslim authorities did not like this. It would endanger some of their own sacred spaces. So soon enough, the task of dealing with the women of the wall, what the government was calling, at this point was calling the headache of women of the wall, was given to government officials, Avichai Mendelblit and Naftali Bennett, both members of one a minister in religious affairs and one a member of the cabinet. They came up with a new plan. There would be two areas: the traditional Kotel and a new pluralist area called Ezrat Yisrael. And the government would make it really nice and pour in a lot of money to making it really nice. And this is far more important to the reform and conservative movements, because I don't think particularly diaspora reform and conservative Jews, this is key for them. The reform and conservative Jews in Israel were promised that this was a gesture that was a harbinger of greater pluralism in terms of issues of conversion and issues of marriage. That is the possibility that the Israeli rabbinate, which is Orthodox, might be forced to acknowledge the possibility that non-Orthodox conversions and non-Orthodox weddings could possibly be performed in Israel. Right now, and many of you may know this by now, is that if you are a Reform or a conservative or a secular Jew in Israel, the only way that you can be married in the state is by an Orthodox rabbi, which is why many Jews who are not Orthodox will go to Cyprus and will fly to Cyprus, get married there, it's a local place where you can get married, and then will come back to Israel and will have a wedding ceremony with their conservative or their reform rabbi, or create a ceremony of their own. And you should know too that it is not possible for a non-Orthodox Jew to perform a conversion in the state of Israel for that conversion to be acknowledged. So the reform and conservative movements had something to gain by their saying, okay, we'll take this new space. At this point, women of the wall divided into two. Anat Hoffman and certain members of the board decided that they would accept a space for them among the new area at Robinson's Arch. They would go there. They would leave the Kotel. They would allow the historic Kotel to be the domain of the ultra-Orthodox. In return, they would get some jurisdiction over this new prayer space. They felt that this was a time, that the time was right for them in terms of acknowledgement of pluralism in Israel. They wanted to be part of it. In addition, they were told, and I've been told this many times as well, that should the government have Mendelblit or Bennett's plan signed by Reform and Conservative and any members of Women of the Wall, should that happen, it will then become absolutely illegal for women to pray at the wall as a group. The 2003 judgment by the Israeli Supreme Court will be overturned by the government. Can't do that here. Can do it apparently in Israel. Overturned as well will be a decision in 2013 by the Jerusalem magistrate judge who ruled after more women were arrested, so this is just October this past year, who ruled that, that there is absolutely no reason that the women cannot pray at the wall according to their fashion, absolutely no reason, and the police should protect them. Now I want to tell you something sad, which is that from the time that Sharansky began to negotiate with the Reform and Conservative movements and a certain group of women in the wall, there have been absolutely no arrests and there has been no harassment at the wall. As a matter of fact, in the fall, he addressed the General Assembly, that is Jewish leaders from around the world coming to Jerusalem. He said, I promise you, there will be, while we're working on this plan, there will be no arrests. And this totally was the eeriest thing for me, because, I mean, some of you may remember when Natan Sharansky, then Anatoly Sharansky, was sitting in jail in the former Soviet Union for so many years as a refusenik, being refused to go to Israel, to emigrate to Israel. He was now in a position to tell the police, you can arrest women or you can't arrest women. I think that the reason this is heartbreaking to me is it demonstrates that the women themselves are not the source of the unrest at the Kotel. It's the police who've been arresting them, and it's the ultra-Orthodox Jews who have been harassing them. There's a break-off group called the Original Women of the Wall, of which I am part, and we have said that in 2003, when the government said go to Robinson's Arch and pray there, we said no. There's absolutely no reason that we would go now. Absolutely no reason. We salute the conservative Jews. We salute the Reform Jews, organizations that we might even belong to. We support their creating a new pluralist, egalitarian space in Jerusalem, in an area that does have rocks, rocks and stones, which certainly are connected to the ancient temple. It just so happens that that is not the same site where Jews have gone for 2,000 years. If you walked outside this lecture hall and stood on the other side, it's true, you would be in Temple Israel. And you would sort of be at the site where we were gathering. But trust me, you would not be in that room. You would be hidden, you would be out of sight. My Reform and Conservative colleagues have said to me, Vanessa, listen, now it is a compromise for us. Now it feels weird, but our great-grandchildren will see this new area as the Kotel. And maybe that's true. Those of you who want to walk outside here and continue to listen to the lecture and hope that one day your great-grandchildren can hear, fine. You know, that's fine. It doesn't work. It simply does not work for me. It does not work as a symbol of pluralism in Israel for non-Orthodox Jews to need to find a different space. So right now, we are awaiting the plan. to emerge, whether it will be signed or not, is it's really quite up in the air because there's an interesting glitch. There are always interesting glitches, aside from the usual glitch that the Israeli government might fall, but like that's always happening. It's more likely today, yesterday, or tomorrow. That's always happening. The glitch is the government pronounced some weeks ago that the organization that would be in control of this new lovely egalitarian prayer plaza would not be an alliance of the Reform, the conservative Jews, and representatives of Women of the Wall. It would instead be fully controlled by this group called El-Ad Ir David. If I might say it, a right-wing group very involved in facilitating settlers, particularly in the area adjacent to the old city in the area called Silwan. Reform and conservative Jews freaked and wrote to the government and said, we're pulling out of the plan. We're absolutely out of the plan. And the government responded, okay, we'll deal with that. Well, there's one, as things stand right now, there's one arm of the government that say, okay, we'll change things. Another part of the government, the part of the government that negotiated with El-Ad, they're still sticking with El-Ad. So we don't quite know we don't know where that stands. I spoke 2 nights ago to Rabbi Jerry Skolnick, the president of the Rabbinical Assembly of conservative rabbis, and I told him, and I asked him what exactly is going on, and what he said to me is, he said, there's no written plan. He says there are drafts and drafts and drafts, and it keeps changing, and it's Byzantine and totally loopy. And he says, and what we're getting gets smaller and smaller and smaller. But he also said that from his perspective, this was Sha'at Ratzon. This was a propitious time, because he felt that given that there are no, if I understood him correctly, he said to me that there were no ultra-Orthodox in the government coalitions at the moment. So he felt that this was a time for liberal Jews to seize a certain amount of power and representation in Israel, power and representation that they could never get before. Fine. Seize it. Take it. But do not do so, I said to him, and I said to him as respectfully as I could, do not do that on the backs of Jewish women. For too many years, when our case was held up in court, we would be told, well, we've got such and such a war, we've got such and such an intifada, we've got such and such a crisis. We can't deal with a woman's issue right now. We know that Israel has been behind us in giving all kinds of rights to women. Women's lot is getting better in Israel, but the very fact that women's spiritual rights could be given up in Israel suggests to me that we have a long way to go. So now I'm going to put on my advocacy hat for a moment while I have your attention. And I would say that if you happen to be Reformed or conservative Jews, and if you are not happy with the idea of your movements participating in a decision which will make it truly illegal for women to pray together as a group at the Kotel, please let your rabbis know. Let your rabbis, let your educators know. So you won't say later, but I didn't know. And now it's too late. Many of us travel to Israel, or we hope our children or our grandchildren will travel to Israel. We hope that when they go to the Kotel, that for them it will be a rich experience. May it be a rich experience for Jews of all traditions, for women as well as